Paper, having been invented in China, spread to Japan. There and in other parts of Asia, it was further refined. And yet in Europe, the belief persisted that paper had originated in Europe itself, or the Arab world. How was this popular misconception finally dispelled? And how did China's defeat in an 8th century battle lead to the spread of papermaking? Find out in the 5th part of the series, The Story of Paper.
This is an ancestral shrine in Yamanashi Prefecture in Japan. It honors 3 iconic figures in the history of papermaking. In the middle is Tai Lun, the Chinese man who is credited with inventing paper. On the right is a local papermaking expert, and on the left is a monk called Damjing, who is considered the father of papermaking in Japan. In the 5th century AD, after many years of prolonged warfare, the state of Yamato emerged to unify the Japanese islands. The new social stability brought about rapid cultural development. Books and a writing system were introduced from China and the Korean peninsula. But still, no one in Japan knew how to make paper. In the year 610, a monk named Damjing from the state of Koryo on the Korean peninsula crossed the sea to Japan. According to legend, Damjing was an extremely accomplished scholar who was not only well versed in Buddhism, but also skilled at making paper and ink. The Prince Regent of Japan, Shotoku, developed a fascination with papermaking and dispatched men to help Damjing in his work and learn from him. However, some historians have cast doubt on the truth of the Damjing story. 90-year-old Kumi Yasuo is a leading Japanese expert on the history of paper. In his more than 30 years of studying washu, as paper is known in Japan, he has written some 40 books. His research has led him to conclude that papermaking in Japan must have started before the arrival of the monk Damjing.
中国から朝鮮を経て日本に入ってくるわけですよね。敦長が作ったのは実際は紙、墨、絵の具、それと引き薄ですね。その時作ったのは引き薄となってるわけです。だから紙とか墨とか筆をもっと前に作られてるはずですね。
When Buddhism arrived in Japan in 538 AD, the Prince Regent Shotoku had temples built and issued an imperial decree encouraging the acceptance of Buddhism. But if the religion was to spread, scriptures needed to be readily available for people to read, and this in turn would require vast quantities of paper. Kumi Yasuo therefore speculates that the demand for paper was created by Buddhism, and that Japan initially imported paper before producing its own. In addition, large quantities of paper would have been required by the civil service, and this would also have contributed to the rapid spread of papermaking across Japan.
税金の一つに普通は米を納めるんですが、税金の副産物を納めるのを帳というわけですね。でその帳の紙として、奈良時代には 聖帝ということは青年の男子ですね。青年の男子が、1尺かける2尺、1尺かける2尺の紙を一人で6枚ですかな。6枚収めるということだけ。これを調子というわけですね。
And thus, almost 800 years after it was invented in China, papermaking was finally established in Japan. Initially, Japan adopted the papermaking methods employed in the Han Dynasty period in China. But over the centuries, the techniques would be adjusted to incorporate aspects of foreign cultures. Saitama Prefecture is located on the Kanto Plain in central Japan, north of Tokyo. Kanto is a region of hills and mountains, lush vegetation and crisscrossing streams. 1,000 years ago, during the Heian period, the area became famous for producing a type of handmade paper called hosokawa. The key material used was the bark of the mulberry trees that flourished among the mountains of Ogawamachi in Saitama Prefecture. Japan's craftsmen quickly realized that mulberry bark was ideal for making paper. Mulberry trees can acclimatize to almost any environment, grow rapidly, and are easier to harvest than hemp. The paper made from mulberry bark is also strong and glossy. Takano Teizo is 70 years old. He began learning the art of producing handmade paper when he was just 13. Now, over half a century later, he still follows the daily work routine he developed over the years, starting with an inspection of the workshop every morning. The village of Higashichichibu has a paper-making history stretching back more than 1,300 years. During the Heian period, this area began paying a tribute of paper to the imperial court. The Hosokawa paper it produced was soft, but very tough. According to legend, when fires broke out in the city of Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, merchants would throw their account books, which were made from Hosokawa paper, into a well to save them. After the fires had been extinguished, they would recover their books, dry them, and continue to use them. The paper would show no signs of damage, the ink would not have run, and they could continue to write on them. When the sun begins to shine through the window opposite the vats of paper pulp, work begins at Mr. Takano's paper-making workshop. The mulberry bark has already been soaked and boiled using the traditional methods. The craftsmen carefully remove any impurities. This work, which requires great patience, is crucial to the overall quality of the pulp. This stage is usually repeated several times. The pulping machine is in fact the only machine in the workshop. The carefully selected mulberry bark is placed in it and repeatedly beaten until it is separated into fibres that can be used to make the paper pulp. The next step in the process is the most important. It's the dipping.
中国では古い時代は造紙といったわけでしょ。そして紙をすくい取るという意味で造紙あるいは小紙というのが中国で言っておるね。日本では平安時代から三髄に鹿と書いたこれはコスですよ。水を何してすくい取ったものが水に落下する、滴下する、下にこすという意味ですね。
Paper, having been invented in China, spread to Japan. There and in other parts of Asia, it was further refined. And yet in Europe, the belief persisted that paper had originated in Europe itself, or the Arab world. How was this popular misconception finally dispelled? And how did China's defeat in an 8th century battle lead to the spread of papermaking? Find out in the 5th part of the series, the story of paper.
The filtering technique was developed around 100 years after papermaking first arrived in Japan. A specially formulated paper pulp is used, together with a unique paper scooping method. This was the basis on which the technique of making Hosokawa paper developed. The technique is complex and delicate. The craftsman dips the bamboo screen, which is held in place by a wooden frame, in the vat of paper pulp. Constantly rocking the frame ensures that the paper pulp sticks to it evenly. Once the accumulated pulp has acquired the right thickness, it's removed from the frame and separated from the bamboo screen. This filtering technique is unique to Japanese papermaking, and it's fundamentally different to the accumulative filtering technique of China's Han Dynasty. The Japanese filtering technique requires greater skill on the part of the craftsman. The quality of the paper depends entirely on his ability to make adjustments based on the weight and color of the pulp. Developing a feel for this is extremely difficult.
私いつも生きてる紙作れって言うんですよ。紙一枚見た時に自分の心の中に絵の心が浮かんだり、それから空の雲みたいに繊維が絡まってるのを思い出したり、一人一人が全部その見る感覚に感動を与える足を作ってれば絶対なくならないって言うんですけど。
By the Heian period, papermaking had spread throughout Japan, and this had a fundamental impact on the development of Japan's culture. The mass production of paper fostered increasing numbers of literate people. The Japanese developed their own writing system based on Chinese characters, with the result that they could record their history in their own script. Also during that period, the production of Japanese paper using the filtering technique matured. The paper became known as wa-shi, wa meaning Japanese, and shi meaning paper. In the years that followed, wa-shi alone was used for books. In traditional Japanese architecture, sliding doors, screens, and windows are used to separate indoor and outdoor spaces. Wa-shi, which is made from mulberry bark, is thick and strong, making it ideal for use indoors and windows. Using wa-shi softens the light indoors, allows the air to circulate, and helps maintain a suitable level of humidity. Square frames covered with white wa-shi paper give buildings a simple yet elegant look, and with time, they became a symbol of Japanese aesthetics. And wa-shi, with its integration of artistic quality and practicality, is also used in many other aspects of Japanese life, in everything from parcels, bookbindings, folding fans and umbrellas, to clothing, furniture, and arts and crafts.
障子として照明具として、それから袋物、タバコ入れの袋、それから本なんかを入れる紙文庫というのはこれ花紙なんかも入れるものがあるんですね。それから武具、さらに武具の後にも謎の生活用品として使い、非常に用途がひどい。もっと極端なことを言えば、飢饉の時に紙をお餅にして食べるというようなこともあったわけですが。
In the 1st century AD, Tailuan presented the Chinese imperial court with the gift of paper made from bark, cloth, and fishing nets. Over the next 800 years, many of China's neighbors, including Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, as well as countries further afield in Southeast Asia, mastered the art of papermaking. But the spread of papermaking to the West was far less straightforward. In a drawing of Tai Luen by a Western artist, he's dressed in Qing Dynasty robes and even has a drooping moustache. Were it not for Tai Luen's name written in the bottom right-hand corner, it's unlikely that any Chinese person would connect the portrait with the inventor of papermaking. The painting illustrates Europeans' ignorance regarding the origins of papermaking. So, how did papermaking make its way to Europe? In fact, for a long time, people in the West believed paper was invented by Arabs and Europeans. From the 12th century onwards, a constant stream of missionaries and explorers brought back plenty of information from far-off corners of the Orient. In some of their written accounts can be found references to paper in China. However, people assumed that paper had been introduced into China from Europe or the Arab world. This misconception persisted until as late as the 19th century. In 1877, European archaeologists excavating the ancient tombs at Fayum in Egypt discovered some texts written in Arabic. Laboratory tests showed that the paper made from hemp and mulberry bark originated in a place called Samarkand and dated from between the 8th and 10th centuries AD. This discovery cast doubt on Western scholars' existing understanding of the origins of hemp paper. At the turn of the 20th century, Professor of Botany at the University of Vienna, Julius von Weisner, was given a number of ancient documents written on paper. These documents originated from northwest China. They'd been discovered and brought back to Europe by the famous Hungarian-born British explorer Sir Mark Aurel Stein. Unable to date the documents or decipher what was written on them, Stein had sent some of them to Professor Weisner's laboratory. Professor Weisner conducted tests on the documents and was surprised to discover that the Chinese paper was the same as that found in the ancient Egyptian tombs at Fayum. Both were made from hemp and mulberry bark. He concluded that the Stein documents dated from the 3rd or 4th century AD, making them more than 600 years older than those found in Egypt. From Europe to Asia, then to China, the same materials but getting progressively older. The conclusion was obvious, but it ran counter to the prevailing belief among European scholars. Historians eventually found the key to the whole mystery at a river called the Talas.
Paper, having been invented in China, spread to Japan. There and in other parts of Asia, it was further refined. And yet in Europe, the belief persisted that paper had originated in Europe itself, or the Arab world. How was this popular misconception finally dispelled? And how did China's defeat in an 8th century battle lead to the spread of papermaking? Find out in the 5th part of the series, The Story of Paper.
Every morning when the call to morning prayer echoes above the madrasas, the most ancient city in Central Asia awakes, and its Muslim inhabitants begin their first prayers of the day. In the Uzbek language, Samarkand has the meaning fertile land. As early as the 7th century, The Sogdians, who were renowned traders, built Samarkand into a magnificent capital, and the city was a key stop on the Silk Road from China to Europe through India and the Arabian Peninsula. Merchants from north, south, east and west converged on Samarkand, making it a place where different cultures mingled. In the mid-7th century, the famous Buddhist monk Xuanzang stopped briefly in Samarkand on his westward journey to India. According to Buddhist texts, he preached Buddhism here. But today, Samarkand is known as a centre of Islamic study. Ulugh Beg Madrasa, or Registan Square, is considered one of the finest institutions of higher learning in the Muslim world. However, in the city's more than 2,500-year history, it has witnessed rivalries between numerous ethnic groups and political forces, and suffered countless fires and bloody battles. "300 kilometers east of Samarkand lies Kazakhstan. Here, from the northern slopes of the Kyrgyz and Karatau mountains, a cool, clear and seemingly unremarkable river flows down to the valley below. However, its name is one of the most significant in human history, for it was here on the banks of this river that a battle was fought that would influence the course of Eastern and Western civilizations. It was the Battle of Talas. During the 7th century AD, the sphere of Arab influence spread rapidly from the Middle East. Having originally consisted of just a few tribes, the Arab nation built a vast empire spanning the 3 continents of Europe, Asia and Africa. To the west, they occupied North Africa and Spain, and to the east, the whole of Western and half of Central Asia. From there, they planned to head further eastwards. At the time in China, the Tang dynasty was also experiencing a period of hitherto unseen prosperity, but maintaining peace along its western borders involved almost constant fighting. Smaller kingdoms in the region such as Yiwu, Shanshan, Gaochang and Yanqi were all subjugated in the space of a few decades, and the Tang dynasty subsequently established a protectorate over these western regions centered on Anxi. After the Arabs had occupied Samarkand as part of their eastward expansion, the 2 great empires met at the Talas River. In July and August 751, the supreme commander of the Tang army, Gao Xianzhi, led 30,000 men to the Anxi Protectorate. The aim of the expedition was to halt the Arab advance in the region. The 2 armies met at the Talas River. At first, the elite Tang infantry prevailed. But as the battle progressed, the Tang allies from Kaluk and Fergana defected. The Tang army was defeated, and Gao Xianzhi escaped with only a few thousand men. More than 10,000 Tang soldiers were captured. The prisoners were taken to Samarkand. The Battle of Talas forced the Tang Empire to abandon Central Asia and marked the start of the complete Islamization of the region. But, less predictably, the defeat would accelerate the dissemination of Chinese civilization abroad. It wasn't long after the Battle of Talas that Central Asia's first papermaking workshop was established in Samarkand. The question of when the Arab world began using paper and when papermaking first arrived there has long been debated by historians. Most scholars believe that papermaking was brought to Central Asia by the Chinese during the Tang dynasty. However, others argue that paper was manufactured in Samarkand earlier, during the 5th century. Nozim Kabibulev is an Uzbek and an expert on the history of papermaking in the Arab world. His research on the origins of papermaking in Samarkand uncovered a previously unknown historical episode.
И в этой битве на реке Талас якобы, участвовали ремесленники со стороны Китая, которые, хорошо знали изготовление бумаги. Ведь нам всем известно, что Китай является родоначальником изобретения бумаги.
Even as late as the 18th century, Europe's papermakers realized that they still had a lot to learn from China, the country where papermaking originated. In America, the great statesman Benjamin Franklin even wrote a thesis on Chinese papermaking. But what was it that papermakers in the West needed to learn from their Chinese counterparts? Find out in Episode 6 of The Story of Paper.